We're all set. Hey, Benny, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good. This is weird. I should have asked you before. Do you go by Benno now? Because I knew you as Benny.
Yeah, so my birth name's Benjamin. So first day of school, Benjamin, and then Benno's been a nickname that's kind of my adopted name. I go by a lot of names. People call me a lot of things
Yeah,
over the years, some good,
we
some
always called you
bad.
Benny when I knew you. So just
Yeah,
so
yeah,
people know, Benno, you you grew. I think you were a couple years younger than my son.
yeah.
Um, but we played against each other. You, especially in high school, and then I ran some. I was on the board and stuff for Southern Alameda County Youth Soccer League, and you played for Wayne Archer, a friend of mine who had
Yeah.
kids that were a couple years younger than mine. But my son and you played high school together, and I coached at Arroyo High School in San Lorenzo, and you were at Bishop O'Dowd. You played for Pete, I think, right?
For Pete Bellinger. And I actually think I worked with your son at a Jack Hyde soccer camp one summer, I want to
Probably.
say. Yeah, I think there was like way back up at the what's the name of the park down by the Caldecott Tunnel? Anyways, yeah, so it's we share a lot of overlaps, a lot of good people. It's been a long time.
Yeah, so we're gonna bore everybody with two Bay Area guys talking Bay Area soccer and San Francisco Bay Area soccer and East Bay soccer a little bit.
Let's
But
do it.
yeah, you and I started following each other on X, I guess, Twitter, huh? That's kind
Yeah,
of how we
maybe a couple years
reconnected. And
ago.
then you reached out to me one day, and it's like, oh, Benny, holy crap! I hadn't heard
Yeah.
that name in a while, but it's great to see, man. You've been really involved in the Bay Area soccer world and doing some amazing things. I saw you were involved with the Roots. I think, did you help start the Roots?
Yeah, I mean, there was a group of people that kind of came together, but I was definitely the first one to say, "Hey, I'm going to start a club," and just kind of started meeting people and connecting, and you kind of seek out like-minded folks, and the universe has a way of getting folks together. But yeah, that was a project that I had originally when I was in graduate school, written a business plan for a club called East Bay United Soccer Club, which then became used for another club, but wasn't my idea. But I had written a business plan, and then when playing in all these different NPSL teams back in the day, just I saw a lot of groups. Like I remember one year I played with La Marinda Soccer Club, and Mohammed was running an NPSL team, and we had like 6 or 7 guys that got drafted that next year to go play MLS. And the team folded after one year, and I had experienced similar things with the Bay Area Ambassadors where there's a lot of really talented players and
Yeah.
financially you just see the club struggling. And I just was always curious about what could it take to actually build a sustainable organization? Because I just saw the talent that was there, whether it was my own ambitions as a player to have a place to play at a high level, or guys that I knew that were actually going to the next level. And it's like, well, what if you could keep all these guys here and build something? And when I was over living in Europe, and maybe we'll talk about this over the course of the next hour on my coaching journey, I was pursuing the highest level of soccer that I could be in, which is why I was in European football. But then I was reading about clubs back in the States like Detroit City and Chattanooga FC. And so I kind of started kicking myself over like, man, I should come back and take that paper I wrote and dust it off and try to put something together. So that was what brought the Roots about. I've kind of carried that same ethos into the projects I do now.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, I know, if we're marching backwards and stuff, I know, my son played for the Frogs, which was a team, USL team. And then I coached at the Bay Area Seals. And before that, it was the San Francisco Seals. And the San Francisco Seals was all, boy, pre-MLS days, they had all the best players. I mean, I think Dyak and Medved and oh crud, I can't think of all the guys, but they made an amazing USL run that most of us in the Bay Area fall. I mean, sorry, US Open Cup run that a lot of
Yep.
us in the Bay Area followed. They beat Kansas City in the early days of the MLS, and they beat the Clash
Yep.
back in the early days, and all in a run, and so it's crazy and it always blows me away. And in fact, I made a comment on it, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, that it's just so hard with um with running pro soccer teams in the United States because, the question is for the ownership group, how many millions of dollars do we want to lose over how many consecutive years? Because
Yeah,
there's almost no way for them to actually make money. Advertisers don't seem that interested. Of course, if you build a stadium, you're all of a sudden, you're $15 million in the hole before you even open the gates, day one. So you're gonna probably always lose money at that point, and it's always a struggle. And I know that you're involved with the town now, right? And
yeah.
and I know you feel like you've got a good model now for financial stability. Tell us about that.
Unfortunately, there is no model for financial sustainability in pro soccer. I will be the bearer of bad news there.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
like
right. You're
I
with me
think
then. You understand.
there's
I thought at one
ideas,
point I mean,
there's
it's so hard. I mean, you
strategies.
can tie it to youth clubs and you can charge the youth and you can use that to offset costs. And if pay the coaches a reasonable amount or if and if your club directors aren't taking, three club directors all taking 100,000 a year,
Yeah.
people are willing to volunteer and work. I mean, I don't know. Are we lucky to even break even?
I think there's ways to do it. It kind of becomes an accumulation of different things, right? Like you're gonna obviously on the team not go crazy, right? So try to stay as lean as possible, both on the player side and also on what you do on the business side, the front office side. Everybody now like the stadium idea, right? Like it's not just building a stadium, it's building a mixed use development that's got commercial elements for shopping and retail and has maybe some housing elements and kind of the live, work, play, approach where you're then hopefully partnering with a local government or, a city or a county and creating like an entertainment type district where people can go and, go get food before the game and shop, go to the event. Obviously, for sports stadiums and soccer stadiums, even with the footprint that you build for the stadium, you've only maybe got 30 games a year. Or if you have a men's and a women's team, maybe 40 games a year. So it's
Right.
also thinking about, what does that programming look like, the other 300 plus days out of the year, whether that's musical events and concerts, the infamous Disney on Ice stuff, maybe some monster truck action, depending on what you fancy. But I think it's really having to approach it from that angle. Obviously, different parts of the country, economics are different on development timelines to be able to break ground on something, and it'd be much different here in the Bay Area than it would be if you're in, the Midwest or in an expanding community that's kind of growing, and looking to provide things to do for people that are looking to purchase homes. So I think there's obviously the kind of like be lean, stay lean, don't overspend approach, and then there's the facility and infrastructure development approach. I think the youth soccer one, people kind of, and you've been in youth soccer longer than I have, maybe even in some ways as long as I've been alive. But there's this idea that like youth soccer is just like one-stop shop profit center, and you're gonna make all this money. You can and you can't, right? It depends on really your tournament events, your recreational programming, because there's a higher margin there. You're not, you're working with volunteers. Your competitive and elite programs are kind of like the halo effect that you're creating for your club. But to me, it's really if you look at like a surf or a rush, I think the model for a professional club would need to be to build out a few different youth club partners in different parts of your region, maybe even beyond your state, and kind of get a profit center in one place and another one in another place, and maybe have four or five of those different clubs that are affiliated with yours or directly under the same brand. And then you can kind of add up the couple $100,000 that you might profit in each one of those places. And that might then help you again with a lean spend and not going crazy on staff and players to be able to actually break even. And then, hopefully the real estate is going to be, the crown jewel, and might what end up being to position some sort of an exit or, some other person coming in and seeing real value beyond just, the team and the license for the team and all the brand stuff. So it's kind of a weird, you get into it for, doing a team and then you end up actually pursuing all these ancillary opportunities to try to make a business out of it. So it's kind of in some ways, it's like some guys I know that own a restaurant. They're like, yeah, I got into this restaurant thing because I really loved the food, and now I'm doing landscaping, and
Right.
I'm dealing with my sewage system in my restaurant. Like that's not why I did it, but that's what I'm doing, right? So I feel like there's a lot of that. And then the player component and developing players. I mean, think back to all the guys that you saw back in the day, playing in the East Bay, and then a few of them went pro, but there's probably a lot of guys that would have been able to had they had these systems that are in place now for kids today. We talked about Kamani Hill the other day, right? But like, and he was a special, unique talent. That was like a once in a generation type guy. But there's a lot of guys that would have, and think about the journey that your son took and other guys took just because there wasn't that built-in, ready to go system. So I think if you get that right, maybe you get some kids that are worth some money. But then again, you're having to add up like 10 different things to get to one one break even moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's business in general. I remember many, many years ago talking to Gerard van der Lem and Frans Hoek when they were at Ajax and then were getting ready to go to Barcelona. And they were talking about the marketing deals that Man United and Ajax had had done because Ajax didn't understand the marketing like Man United did, but Man United didn't understand the youth development scheme like Ajax did. And so they were talking about trying to share. And of course, when you develop at the pro level, when you develop youth players at the right way, you're able to sell them. So that's a revenue stream. And of course, advertising, selling jerseys, having jerseys, at every in all of the retail shops all over the world is money and dollar revenues for television deals in other countries and things like that, that revenue streams. So I mean, business is always different sources of revenue streams. The problem we have in the United States, and I think some of our soccer public gets it, but some of it doesn't, and everybody says, why can't we do it like they do it in Europe? And there's not one set European model. You have the true community owned clubs in Europe where the community pays dues to those clubs. And so they get access like they can use the tennis courts, right? And they can use the swimming pool and the gym. And it's a fitness club. It's a sports club. And then part of
Yep.
that is youth soccer. And so the community actually owns that club, and the season ticket holders own a piece of that club. That's one of the models that is out there. And I think, at times I think that could work in the right cities, in could work in places like the Bay Area. But again, man, you need land. And if you're talking New York or Los Angeles or heck, with the prices today, even it could be Idaho for Pete's sake. My son coaches in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and those homes anywhere around the lake are, $2 million homes. And it's not the
Yeah.
home, it's the land. So
Yeah.
land's getting expensive. That's becoming more difficult. And then the other way that it's done is that the private equity owns teams, right? Whether it's corporations or ownership groups, which is typically how it's done because the team is so expensive, like an Arsenal or Man United or whatever. And those then make enough money to subsidize the youth sports and possibly like Barcelona has, multiple sports. They have a basketball team that plays in the European pro
Yeah.
leagues, and they have a tennis
Yeah.
team, and they have different teams that play in different pro leagues. But we really don't have a structure like that in the United States.
I don't think I mean, we have possibilities. I think that's the beauty of the US in some regards. We don't, and we do. I mean, like the multi-sport as an example. If you think, just in the last year and a half, like girls flag football has really exploded. So it wasn't
Yes.
like there was a bunch of pre-existing, like if a pro soccer club tried to get into youth baseball, it would be challenging in some ways because, they would have to go partner with the youth baseball organization or start their own. And maybe that wouldn't be a problem. They wouldn't piss off people because they might not be fans anyways, right? But there are some new emerging sports leagues that I think if the right clubs can think about that and kind of add, hey, let's do girls flag football and let's, look at our own youth baseball or let's look at basketball. I think there are ways to kind of put it together. It was mind blowing for me when I was living in the Netherlands. And I remember at FC Twente in the academy where I was working, we went and played a game early in the time that I was there. I remember walking into the clubhouse of the club we were playing against and looking at their logo that was on the floor. Like, you walk in over the entrance and it had like a crest, but it was like four different sports. They had like field hockey, which is big in the Netherlands, and they had football, soccer. They had like volleyball one. I think they had one other sport. Maybe it was an aquatic sport that they had, but it was all like in their crest. Like that was their club identity. And it was very like with the Roots, it's Oakland Roots Sports Club, right? And that was always the thinking. Hasn't happened, but again, I think that there's opportunities for clubs to do that. The other thing that's it's also unique that a lot of people maybe don't know is in global football, very few people are profitable. Some maybe in some examples, if they really have their system worked in and they're selling players consistently, there are examples of some clubs that do turn profit. But for the most part, the joke is that like everybody in global football is for sale. It's just a matter of what price because all the owners know at a certain point they're going to want to exit or they get old and it's just not their thing anymore. And it's yeah, I don't know the answer to that other than saying like you have to be, a very high net worth person or you have to be a group of people so you can kind of share the loss across a collective. You have to have liquidity. It's not just your net worth, but you actually have to have liquidity to be able to put real money into the club. And then you have to have a very almost kind of an irrational passion to just wanting to do it. There just
Right.
has to be an element of you where it's just, yeah, I get that there's risk. I get that there's this. I get that there's that. The ball bounces this way. The ball bounces that way, but I just want to do it. And I think an element of that. And, like you're mentioning the private equity groups getting involved in sports, it's a a real thing and it's also in some ways a good solution because now it gives ownership groups different sources of capital that they can get access to, whether they're selling out and leaving or they're just looking for a strategic partner. Although I do think there is a lot of kind of the blind leading the blind in some ways where it's just money going after an asset class, not really having a plan, you know, this whole multi-club model where people were trying to like accumulate five or six different things like what Red Bull originally did or Man City kind of made famous. So there's a lot of kind of like, yeah, just a lot of capital, but not a lot of execution and good
Yeah, this
outcomes.
whole private equity involvement, and we're seeing it now in college sports, wanting to come involved in college sports, and it feels to me a little bit like you're probably a little too young for this, but remember the dot-com boom that we had in the Bay Area of the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, and it was insane. I mean, if you had a new .com idea, there was money out there. There was venture capital money in it, and
Yeah,
venture capitalists were throwing money at just ideas without any infrastructure at all or
yeah,
without any real software. They were throwing money at ideas, crazy money. And this is kind of the sports world and private equity money kind of feels like that to me. I just hear some crazy money being thrown out at the big university institutions. I mean,
yeah.
nobody's throwing money at Cal State East Bay for their sports, but
Not yet,
but
maybe soon. Yeah, it's it's one of those deals where like if you're a $10 billion fund or you're a $60 billion fund or you're some number in between, even if you're a $5 billion fund, you might have this kind of alternative high risk at portfolio that you do outside of the box stuff. And soccer and sports has now kind of been seen as like, okay, it's a product that people are very passionate about. You're getting a lot of consumer data from the people that come to these games and buy these tickets, which has, third party sell on ability. You can end up leveraging that data for other means. The player trading thing is funny because yeah, you'll hear people talk about player trading like it's just some formula you plug into the computer and all of a sudden you're going to sell a player, right? And I think that's some of the criticisms I have where and even the multi-club thing, right? Like you buy 5 clubs, great, but then like how do you collectively manage that? And to think that we're gonna have this one club in a small club in Denmark and a big club in France, and we're gonna take this player from Denmark and move him to France and then sell him from the French club. And it's like, it's certainly possible. There's people that are doing it, but if you have a very creative number 10 that's a young Danish player that you're now moving to this French club, well, that French club may not need that position, or they may have a different style of football that may not complement that kid's trajectory, right? And so to think that you're just going to build this like multi-club infrastructure and throw money at it and just go invest to invest, I just kind of feel like there's maybe sometimes an over reliance on this like sports data and data analytics to drive some of this. It's great that there's capital out there, but there's
Right.
kind of sometimes more, I won't say harm than good, but I think it begs the question at a certain point, like, has it been beneficial to making better football players? I don't know that it has.
Yeah, well, and then the other part of it, Benno, is that there's the psychological side of it. I mean, we all remember, what happened to Landon, right? Or to Freddie Adu before that, and you get these guys that are extremely talented. I mean, I don't care what the online community says about, a Freddie Adu type player. He was extremely talented, but you don't know what the mental makeup of a player is going to be going into the pro game. So it's still highly speculative. I mean, look, we had this 16-year-old kid for Arsenal last week score a goal. It's like, okay, but now can you do it 2 games in a row and 3 games in a row? And can you do it, 15, 20 in a season? And then can you get a second contract? And can you get a third contract? Can you have a real career out of it? There's so many unknown factors that don't have to do with just the technical, tactical, and physical. You've got the mental makeup of a player and the psychosocial piece of a player that, man, it's just so hard to say this player is going to make us money when they're a youth player.
Big time. Yeah. I mean, kids go through growth, they go through different motivations that can change. There can be stress at home, there can be relationship issues at home and in the family. Um,
Right,
for me, it was interesting, like obviously not as a player, but as a coach when I was living in Croatia and working in Dinamo Zagreb's academy. And I had been in the Netherlands prior to that, but like everybody in the Netherlands spoke English. So like, you would obviously hear Dutch everywhere you went, but once they knew you spoke English, they could get into English. They could talk with you and stuff like that. And in Croatia, well, I had friends and guys I was working with, and we would talk in English. They would obviously speak mostly in Croatian. And when I would go out on my own, or if I was just spending the day by myself, it was the first time where I would go almost a whole day and not hear English. And that
right.
was like weird for me, not in a bad way. I wasn't like depressed about it. It was just different,
It's
right?
culture
And
shock. Yeah,
yeah, it's a little bit of that, right? And so like you can also see, is it a kid who's moving by himself at 18 years old to go play, is their family going with them? Do they have a girlfriend or a significant other or a wife or whatever? I think it's hard to predict. And then the pressure is real. I mean, that's another thing that I think the kids in America don't get in that same way. If you look at the top kids, the best kids are usually the best kids all the way through. In Dynamo, I don't know if this number is still true because I worked there, 10 plus years ago, but I think it was from like year to year, you would get like almost like 50% attrition from age group to age group just because it was such a talented academy and there's so many players that wanted to be a part of it. So from under 8 until under 12, they would just recruit from Zagreb, and Zagreb is like 1 million people. So there's a lot of, and soccer is the biggest sport. So there, every year there's kids that were like in the second club. They played for Lokomotiva. They played for some other group. They'd always be coming in to try out. Then when you got to U13, they'd start pulling from the whole country. This is
right,
right when they got into the European Union. So it's even gotten more competitive because now there can be European Union players that come in as a youth.
right.
Um, and then at a certain point, like U16, they would recruit from anywhere, which would be anywhere in the Balkans, anywhere in Europe, like Danny Almo as an example. He came to Dinamo to play as a U19 player, left Barcelona to do that. And so anyway, so if you think about these kids that by like 17, if you're like a local Zagreb kid that started at the U8s and was a really talented player, and now it's U17 and you're still there, you've seen so many people get cut. You've seen all types of things transpire. You have trialists coming out all the time, even if you're a youth national team player. And so you just have to build that mental resiliency and that fortitude and that hunger to fight for your spot all the time. And it's way different than here, where like the best kids for Deanza Force, maybe there's the Quakes that are taking, not taking, but getting the best kids because that's where they should be. But, like the best of the best are really not challenged in that same way. So they get comfortable. And I think that hurts their game in some ways, and it's hard to peg how do you address that other than just make more kids better and earlier. You're naturally going to see it, but that was a big thing for me seeing that. It's just like these kids were just like machines at like 16, 17. Like they had just been through the grind and they still had that talent so they could play with pressure. They knew how to deal with, hey, if I have a crap game or I have a crap couple games, I'm going to get dropped. And if I get dropped from the team, it's more than likely my dream's done. And in Croatia, maybe it's a little different now, but economic opportunities weren't abundant, so that was also a big driver. Whereas here, a kid can, drop out of college and still become a tech billionaire if they want to. You know what I mean? Like it's just a
Right.
different economy. So yeah, I think it's all in some ways it's good because like I'm grateful that we have a society that cannot be dependent upon like, athletic achievement to become wealthy. But
Right.
there's definitely a mental side of the game where I just don't know if these kids are being prepared in a way to make them resilient enough for what the higher level demands are. Let alone a coach that yells at them or something like that. It's a whole different world just on that subject.
Yeah, and I know there's some coaches out there that are doing a good job at emotionally and mentally developing our players, but I think if we talk in generalities as a whole, I think our system does a terrible job. And I think the players that are making it are in spite of the system, not because of the system. Um, and that I've got some sayings that I throw out quite frequently, and one of the concepts is about player development and how it has to do with players players getting told the truth, getting told what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, and and when I talk about that concept, the first thing people will throw out and the most common response is, yeah, but if the coaches don't tell the players what they want to hear, then the coaches don't have paying customers, then the clubs don't make money, then the coach loses their job, and everybody's just doing it for the business of the, needs to feed their family, right? And needs to think of the business of the game. And it's just so wrong, in my
Oh
opinion.
yeah.
It's just so bad for kids not to be told that yeah, you can play for Stanford, or you can play for Notre Dame, and you can play professionally, and we're going to help you develop. And that's what we do here as a club, is we develop professional players, or we develop college players, or we're going to get you a scholarship. All of that stuff comes under the category of extrinsic motivation. And anybody who's studied even a little bit of psychology knows that extrinsic motivation only works a little bit. If players are only playing to chase the carrot, then they get tired of chasing it eventually, because you can never catch it. Even if you make it professionally under a contract, you've still not caught that carrot, because you got to get a
Yeah.
second contract and then you got to play for a third contract. You're playing for a starting spot every day, and then the best players are playing to be, the best players on the team, and then the best players in the region, then the best players in the country. Then how many years can I be the best player in the country? Then can I be mentioned as one of the best players in the world? And that it's always that carrot's always being moved. So
Yeah.
Benno, every player I've ever interviewed, every book that I've ever read, on a professional player, they talk about playing for the love of the game. If they play because they wanted to play more. And if they
Yeah.
thought about playing in college, it's because they didn't want to stop after high school. And if they thought about playing in the pro, it's because they didn't want to stop after college. They just loved the game so much that they couldn't imagine not playing.
Yeah. No, it's I'm 38 now, so like I'm kind of removed from that mentality of as an athlete. But yeah, it's like part of you. It's like you just have to express that element of your kind of like if it's your creative spirit or your warrior spirit or whatever it is that's in you that wants to go out on the
Right.
field and express that. And yeah, that was a big transition for me when I stopped. You walk into a room, you're used to being the fittest guy in the room, and then you don't feel that way anymore, and your whole
Right.
identity kind of shifts. But yeah, I mean, there has to be an internal drive from the kid. I think it's how do we then create an environment that helps to, the mental ignition moment, or, to kind of cultivate and support that flame that's already burning. I think that's another big challenge, at least for me, right? Like, I didn't, I just found it in my own way. It wasn't by design, but like, I didn't really get into soccer until I was maybe 5, 6 years old. You start thinking about a kid that sees a soccer ball when they're 6 months old and, they see their dad playing soccer, or they see it on TV, or they just recognize its cultural importance. They kind of like naturally are going to progress, law of averages, right? You have a whole country of people where soccer is like the thing, and then you're going to
Right.
get that natural gravitation to it. And then those kids are going to be, who's the most motivated, who has the most drive, and then who has the talent or the ability. And then how does the club identify that and then support that and have a program in place? Here in the US, I mean, it is some of the youth soccer clubs are some of the most toxic environments I've ever experienced. And it's parent driven, and it's yeah, they pay the money, they pay the $5,000 a year fee. And if this one parent and this other parent aren't happy and they leave, then that destabilizes that team. And, so there's all this kind of coddling to the customer as they see it, right? And it's like, well, no, they're more of like a member, and if they don't want to be a member, well, there's the door. They can go be a member someplace else. But, that takes a lot of courage from directors. And then the other structural inefficiency, which is, I think, in a good way, what private equity and some of these groups will be changing, is that these are nonprofit parent run organizations. So they're that that toxic mom or toxic dad on your team could like literally, if they get motivated enough, become a board member of your club just through the election cycle that happens every year, every two
Oh
years,
yeah.
whatever, and so and there's plenty of examples of that where some parent either got on the board and then goes and takes out things on the director and the coaches, or some parent has an issue with the coach or issue with the director and they end up having a relationship, a friendship, or a part, with somebody on the board, and kind of like the mob gets together and they lobby the board,
Right.
this person's a problem and we want them gone. And so it's challenging in that way because like these are volunteer people that are then working with coaches in an employment environment, right? And so yeah, it's just it's insane to me that it still functions that way. And it, yeah, it's hard to see a club be able to take a real stand on like, this is what we're going to do, this is what makes the game better. Because yeah, if a couple people get pissed off, that can be your job. Now overseas, a talented player that's worth some money and has an agent and all this stuff, stuff like that can also be its own issue, right? Where you've got a very talented player that they think that they're
Hmm.
worth something, or they are actually worth something, and now they've got an agent at U15, U16, and they can have their own demands of what they need to make it work, right? So it's kind of not a clean environment on both sides, but at least there you can understand that it's built off of a talented kid that might be worth something.
Right.
Here it can just be a problem family or a problem kid or whatever. Even the coaching, style, right? And if you go up to a kid and you say, "Man, you really suck today. What was going on?" Now you can say that in a constructive way. Like, you're not like, "You suck, you're horrible," whatever. But even using language like that in a positive way or a constructive criticism way, that could get you in trouble. You know what I mean? Or the way that people want their kid to be spoken to have that standard of like, "Hey, you don't like it, I'll kick you out of training. You'll kick a kid out of practice. you're getting an email from the mom or the dad, and that may then get you in trouble, even though the kid was being a jerk or not doing what they're supposed to do, and you're trying to set an example. I mean, it's just when I think when I imagine what it would have been like when you were an athlete versus for me as an athlete, and then I think about these kids today, then I can start seeing where some of these problems pop up mentality wise, because I just really feel that they're soft. A lot of these kids are just not being prepared for life, which I think we're failing them at that. And kids got to grow, maybe not even the kid, the parents got to grow a little thicker skin to let the kid grow some thicker skin of their own at times. So it's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, there's from
No,
whatever
it's
angle
but
you
it's
hit
all
it.
valid, man. It's all valid and it's all current. And I'm hoping, I'm hoping we're seeing a pendulum shift go from, the to coin common phrases, snowflake or soft or, snowplow parenting and helicopter parenting and all of these ideas that, you know, that 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 congeal the thought that we've got to protect kids, right? That we've got to protect them, and I'm not talking about predator protection. I'm just talking about protecting them
Yeah.
from everything in life. The idea of, Perel hand sanitizer, you know, look, germs are good. You need to be exposed to germ. It builds your immune system. It makes you stronger. And some bit of bullying is good. It was good that I got bullied and beat up at times when I was a kid. It was good. It helped make me tougher, and it was good that I had coaches that would, we'd do, when I played for Southern Alameda County Youth Soccer League in the 70s, we had a coach that, you'd take a lap around the field and then he'd say, take another, and we take another, and we take a third. And if one kid goes, whew, oh, you thought that was hard? Go take another one. You should be tougher than that, right? And if one
Yeah.
kid said, "When are we going to get some water?" Oh, you want some water? Water makes you weak. Go take another one. And I'm not saying that we should get back to treating kids that way necessarily, but there was an element of that made us stronger, that made
Yeah.
us tougher. And then when the games came, if we got kicked or if we got yelled at or if the fans were getting on us as a goalkeeper, which I was, if somebody stood back behind my goal and screamed or yelled at me, I laughed at them. It didn't bother me because I had experienced harder things from my own teammates and my own coaches. So that
Yeah.
stuff didn't bother me. And I think it leads to a more resilient player and a more resilient human being. And I'm hoping that, we went from, maybe that was a little too much. Obviously, water didn't make us cramp up like they thought it. And they'd scream at you, "Don't drink water. You can rinse your mouth out, but water makes you cramp up. Don't drink the water." Okay, maybe that was a little too far. I get that. But now we've
Yeah.
gone the other way where, like you said, if you say, "What's wrong with you? You're really sucking out there today. What's going on?" It's like your head's not in it. Let's talk about it. Oh, coach told me that I suck, and he said that I'm horrible, and he doesn't like me, and coach is picking on me. And it's like, I'm just trying to have a conversation, kid.
Yeah. Well, Pete Bellinger. I mean, Pete was a wild man at times at O'Dowd. I mean, that's what was such a benefit of having Wayne Archer because he was just such a soft, calm,
He's a
kind of
sweetheart.
balance to that. Wayne was the best, right? And we had that the team I played, Nick Archer and that group of kids at Sac Stars. We were like the best team in that region. We were really, really talented for our age, for the 87.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was a really good, really,
It was a
yeah,
good
traveling
group.
team before the, so people don't know, before the days of ECNL and before the days of MLS Next, or even it might have been before Super Y leagues.
Yeah.
You just, all the best kids played locally. They didn't travel
Yeah.
to go to do their team per se. They all played locally and played locally against better teams. And, for you, it would have been Ballistic United you would have had to play against, or
Yeah.
Livermore, or Dublin Shamrocks. And
Mustang. Yeah. Yeah.
there were some really good Lafayette, La Marinda,
La Miranda. Yeah.
really
Yeah.
good local teams, Berkeley, and yeah, really good
Yeah.
local teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Would have, I'm thinking, Ballistic, Mustang. There was that USA 17 Academy for a couple years down in the South Bay that was really good.
Oh yeah.
Some of the San Jose clubs that were talented. A couple groups in the city. Yeah, La Miranda obviously as well. Back when like Todd Higley was running it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right.
yeah, and so yeah, so like again, I think of Pete Bellinger, like, and he was a great guy. Like, if I saw him today, I'd give him a huge hug. He wouldn't, there'd be no animosity. But when he was my coach in high school, he would not just on me, he would go off on people, and he'd also, that wasn't like the only thing he did. Like, that could happen. There's probably 95% of the other stuff that was just normal coaching, but he was very passionate with how he coached. And um, if Pete would have been in a club environment today, there's no way he makes it through the first month, right? Because, like, for him, he was a little extreme in some ways, but it was just normal. Like, it wasn't, everyone knew it was coming from it. There wasn't like abuse. It was just like he was being critical and challenging you, and you had to level up to what he was expecting, or that was not going to go well, and you had to then find it in yourself to meet that demand. And yeah, like at the example you gave of, like, you say all this constructive stuff and you just use that one word, suck. And then that's what the kid's going to, oh, he said that I suck, and then you get the parent involved, and it's just all these things that make it tough. Um, and then when you think about that in the game, right? And now this kid gets a little upset, or he gets a little this or that, and then you see performance drop, and I think, again, that was like, Croatia is an example I have, only because I spent time there. My wife's from Brazil. I just spent a month in Brazil, and our little cousin Leo plays under nine. He played with Palmeiras Academy, which is, big club. And you can just see the resiliency, the toughness this kid had, even at, like, watching him play. It's just a harder life, when they have other difficulties. Um, I just, not that I want that for our kids. Like, I'm happy that we have, like, economic vitality and upward mobility and,
Right.
like, free market economy, like all the things that make it nicer. But then on the athletic performance side, it's like you then have to be cognizant of that, and then how do you compensate to not let your kid become super soft and pampered? And I think that's got to be giving a little bit more free rein to a coach to just be demanding. And you can see it, like, take La Marinda with Mohammed, with Mo. Like, he's hard, tough guy. He's produced a lot of players, and I'm sure there's examples of other guys where if you just kind of let them work their method, it works. But yeah, it's a huge issue now. And I think in the youth club setting, the fact that these clubs are nonprofit run, parents run it, it's not even like it is a business, but it's not being treated like a business. So I see a lot of disruption that will happen in the next 5 to 10 years, from pro clubs that will then start going into the youth, not just the elite level, but building down to rec and building their little empire to kind of supplement the losses on their pro team.
Well, we're starting to see it, aren't we? We've got MLS next two now,
Yeah,
right?
the academy division. Yeah.
Right. And so you've got that, and it's like, okay, come on, this is a money grab. We can see where this is going. Next, we'll have pre-MLS next, like they have pre-ECNL. I had the father yesterday. I just opened up the email or a DM, and the dad's talking about how disappointed his 11-year-old was daughter not to make the pre-ECNL team at 11.
Yeah.
And
Oh
it's
man, they
like,
call them they call it pre-CNL at U9. It's
oh,
insane, the psychology.
holy
Yeah.
smokes.
Yeah.
What are we doing? My response was, it's a blessing. It's a blessing she didn't make that team. It means nothing. Let your kid be a kid and play with their friends for a little while. Your kid's 11 years old, and we're already worried about college, right? We're already worried about, oh, what's the pathway to college? What's the pathway to pro? It's like your kid hasn't even hit puberty yet. They haven't even got a car yet. They haven't gone on their first date yet. They haven't gone to their first dance yet. There's so
Yeah.
much growing up to do. And who knows if your kid's even gonna like soccer. And if we're worried about college at 11 years old, your kid's gonna hate soccer. They're gonna hate it.
For
They're
sure.
gonna look at it
For
as a
sure.
job. And once you
Yeah.
see something as a job, um, I've got another player I talked to a couple days ago where she plays she plays ECNL level, but she's also was a mogul skier for like the under 15 Olympic team. And the first question is, well, like, why are you stopping that? She goes, oh, just so much time. You got to go to Europe and you got to ski on the slopes in the Europe in the summer, right? You got to travel and you got to go to all these events all around the world. And it's a job. And it just burned her out. Just burned her out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Parents need to see that we can do that with soccer just as easily. We can burn these kids out just as quickly. And these are
Yeah.
talented players, right? Players that maybe could play professionally later on. Who knows? I don't know.
I mean, like for me, again, I think about it. I'm grateful in some ways that I was there in the time that I was. Like when I was a kid, my dad would take us down to the park. We'd have a baseball glove and a baseball. We throw, play catch, throw a football around for a little bit. We have a soccer ball. We just kind of did all of it. I played high school lacrosse. I played a little bit of high school football. I played flag football through middle school. I played basketball, organized basketball through middle school. I never did organized baseball, but would play a lot of, after school, play a lot of baseball. We'd play with a tennis racket and a tennis ball, baseball type stuff too, right? Like you just
Right.
do it in different ways. And it gave me that, I can hoop, I can throw a football with a tight spiral for 40 yards. Like, I can throw a baseball, I can hit. I suck at golf, so I never got that, but I can play a
We
lot of
all
sports
suck
and
at
actually
golf unless we spend
okay.
20 hours a week at it. We all suck at it.
But like so I have that to this day, and I still wound up being high motivation for soccer and making it like my life, and if I had been like pushed hardcore in part just because I'm kind of like a contrarian type guy, I probably would have rebelled against it and been like, nah, I'm good. I don't want to do this anymore. So I feel like a lot of these kids now, by the time they're 13, they probably played like 6 tournaments a year for 9 years, and they're doing private trainings twice a week, and then they have their team practice 3 times a week. And I'm hearing stuff about kids waking up at like 6 in the morning to go do private sessions. And again, it's not the end of the world, you know what I mean? But when you layer in all of that, and then for a lot of these kids, their academic schedule is pretty challenging, and they've got other stuff, right? It's not like in Croatia in Dinamo where I was at, and this is true in other places. If the kid was really good, 15, 16, they stopped going to school. They just that was what they were going to do. They signed the academy contract with or the pre-professional contract, and they're in a big club. That was it. Like they're gonna drop out, or they're gonna take some modified school schedule. But here you might have a kid that's playing Surf Cup on the weekend in San Diego, hopping a flight back on Sunday night, and then has like a calculus test on Monday morning that they've had to study for throughout the
Right.
last couple of days while doing Surf Cup, and then they've got an AP history test the next week, and then they've got their whatever stuff for SAT prep, and just all of that together. I feel for these kids, they just um, they don't have time to just be kids and climb a tree, just basic basic stuff like that. Not that we were climbing trees all day every day or whatever, but like I would walk home from school. I don't think kids do that anymore, you know.
Right.
Go ride your bike around the neighborhood. I don't think kids do that anymore. So I just don't know what the impact has on even like creative decision making, like they just so many things are programmed for them. They just don't have that ability to like, have imagination, entertain themselves. And now the phones make it even worse. And you just see these kids on their phone, four of them together, walking down the street. Everyone's on the phone, looking at the screen. I just it's how do you then build a system that kind of compensates for that? So yeah, I don't think I'll be able to
And then
solve
what's A then what's
solve that.
AI going to do to us? I mean, this is just it doesn't stop technologically. We're
Yeah.
in a spiral technologically as far as thinking and creativity and that kind of stuff. Man, it just oof.
Oh, you see, I mean, go to like maybe not every club, but like I've been in clubs and around teams where you go get a bunch of 16-year-old kids to try to figure out how to put together a 10 by 10 pop-up tent where they got to pull the pins out and push it up. And like they can't solve for that. They can't figure out how to put a tent that's like the most self-explanatory thing in the world. Just look, oh, there's a ring. I'm going to pull that. There's a button that pops up here. I'm going to just slide it up until it pops in. You know what I mean? Like just stuff like that. Yeah, I've seen kids where you organize a rondo grid at the beginning of a training and you got your bag of balls and you say, "Hey, go grab go grab some balls." They go grab one ball out of the bag. You're like, "Hey, you probably want maybe like four or five of those for your group." And oh yeah, okay. So just like even basic stuff where you're like, okay, your brain is not figuring out the basic stuff, and that's yeah, you see it in the play, right? And especially with coaching and kind of the joystick coach stuff, right? You also have a lot of coaches now that are aspirational of their own. So they're going and they're on YouTube and they're watching stuff or they're kind of emulating what they see. And now all of a sudden they're giving the speech that Pep Guardiola gave that they watched on Amazon Prime and they're delivering that to their
Right.
U10, second team, right? And they just
Right.
all this, so I guess it's healthy. It's just progression. It's probably just like chaotic growth. Um, but yeah, you look at I did this thing the other day. I was curious. I typed into Chat GPT. I was like, what's the total revenue of all soccer in the country per year? If you include like pro club investments and youth club revenues and this, that, the other. And it was some astronomical figure, hundreds of, billions of dollars. If you go over 10 years, it was like, like per year, you're in the multi-billions. And I think if you look at just the national team, our national team, men's national team, and you look at the value of all those players together, and it's like a fraction of what is being invested to be spent. If you go and you actually look at like what are we producing in value players, take the top 300 American male athletes, soccer athletes, and what are those 300 guys worth? And then think about all the money that's been invested into the system from the pro level to the youth level to the tournament business to all this stuff. And it's like probably one of the worst ROIs you'd ever get, and I just it's I don't know. I don't know the answer for, people just they gotta just do good work. And like you said, there are quality people that do good work, but then in a lot of cases, if they don't have the elite club status and the other club next door to them does, they can go be the best with the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old kids. But by U13, if they don't have ECNL, if they don't have MLS Next, or they don't have Girls Academy, no matter what they did with those kids to make them the player they are, they're going to lose those kids. And there's no way for their club realistically to get in. There's never going to be another ECNL club in Danville because Mustang's there,
Right.
and there's never going to be a girls' academy club in Orinda or Moraga because La Miranda's there, or there's never going to be another MLS Next club in Pleasanton because Ballistic is there, right? So maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, but I just there's kind of these gatekeeper scenarios.
Right. That's the problem. Right.
Yeah, even if you do good work,
No,
it just
and
gets,
that's where we talk about the for sure in the United States. I mean, we aren't look in England. You can be from Manchester to London and back in Manchester in the same day, top of the country to the bottom and back to the top of the country in a day. You can't do that in California for Pete's sake. You know,
yeah,
you
yeah,
can't do it, let alone the United States. And we are so subculturally driven. I mean, we are dozens and dozens and dozens of countries. It's like having dozens of countries jammed into one country, right? The culture in Louisiana is much different than it is in California. It is massive culture shock if you go from Florida to California or Louisiana to Mississippi or, Missouri to Oregon to from Seattle to New York. Massive cultural differences within one country and our population size. You cannot convince me that we don't have tens of thousands of players, hundreds of thousands of players that are being overlooked because they're
big
not
time.
part of the system. If you go, one of my favorite exercises, if I go to Las Vegas or if I'm hanging out in the Bay Area, if I'm scouting an event, if I go early on a Saturday morning to get some coffee before games come and you go through I don't know if you go through some of the parks in Richmond, let's say, right? And you see a Saturday morning in some of the parks in Richmond, those aren't organized leagues, those are Latino leagues. And you'll see some insanely talented players there that will never leave the Latino leagues. And when they hit 14, they will be playing in the adult leagues,
Yeah.
if they're
Yeah.
really
I saw.
talented, and they'll never get out.
Yeah, no, it's true. I remember I worked maybe like geez, 13 years ago, maybe in a Cal Odyssey. And this was, back in the when the U.S. Soccer Development Academy first started, Cal Odyssey, I think in the first 2 years was like the national champion or national runner-up.
So for
Um,
those that don't know, that's the Central Valley where all of our food is grown.
yeah, yeah, Fresno and the surrounding areas,
Yeah.
Visalia, all the way down to Visalia. I mean, just that whole region, kids would come from all over. And yeah, it was cool. Like I was there with my friend Victor, who's actually now the technical director for Toulouse in France, and our other friend Dario, that's an assistant coach at Loudoun United in the USL. And we had talented kids. We had Max Arston, the U.S. men's national team player, Columbus Crew guy. Was a this he was born in 2000. I think he was maybe even oh 01, but he was like a U13. But if I look through that whole, like I think it was 14s, 16s, 18s were the three age groups that they had back at that point. Um, we probably had 20% or more of our kids that were playing in the like the Liga Latino leagues, or they were playing with their uncles, or they were playing in that. And you could see how that really prepared them, playing with men. Because if you were a talented 15-year-old kid, like you could play at those levels,
Oh
right? And
yeah. Oh
yeah, it was
yeah.
like a real, yeah, just the, learning to jump with your elbows, dealing with tackles, just being able to get yelled at in a different way, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
let alone the heat that they have to deal with there, right? Like, versus if you're a kid growing up in Berkeley and all
Right.
of a sudden it's like, oh my God, it's 95 degrees, I'm gonna die. I say that as a kid who grew up in
Right.
Oakland, right? Like, very spoiled when it
Right.
comes to weather. Yeah, there's no comparison, but then how do you get those kids into the system? And I think they're trying. MLS is working with all the different clubs in MLS Next to have scholarships and make sure that people are putting money towards that. And
Right.
I think with the growth of MLS, in a lot of ways, like, and it was, I guess, smart that they took over from what the federation was doing with the U.S. Soccer Development Academy League. But like from the homegrown division to the academy division to whatever they do in the future, MLS Go, maybe less so because it's kind of rec, but they're looking to build a scouting network where they can then have, because there's just so many kids playing, the more kids that would play in MLS leagues that the league controls, and then there's film from those games. And then if you look at some of the partnerships that they've done, like with Taka, which is the one they've recently done, where they kind of have these quantifiable analytics systems, the more
Right.
kids playing in that league that then feeds into their database, they're then able to help identify players more. Now, I don't know if they would probably say themselves that they're still working on the implementation component of that to actually make it, successful.
Sure.
But that's what I think they're getting at, is trying to grow out and be able to cast a wider net to then capture more kids into, like with the MLS Next, with the Town Academy. We play against the Quakes, we play against Republic. So now if you're the Quakes or your Republic and you want to scout the best players theoretically, because obviously there's kids that aren't the best that aren't playing in those leagues because they're not in the club that's in that level. But for the most part, you're going to have a really healthy starting point to be able to have, for the U16s or U14s, wherever the Quakes and Republic are fielding their academy programs, you just go play all the teams, you see the kids, with your own eyes, and then you have the film around it where then you can then identify those kids easier, right? And then hopefully they matriculate up to, the Quakes or to Republic, and that kind of makes sense. So yeah, so it's an imperfect world. I'm not naive to think that it's going to get better anytime. I think it will get better in the aggregate, but it's going to be chaotic. It's going to continue to be chaotic, and things will happen, and you just kind of have to buckle up and deal with it.
Well, we know it will get better. It will. If you're, I don't know what you remember, but when you were probably 5, 6, 7, there was no soccer on television. None. You couldn't find it. Maybe when you're 8 or so, they started showing a Premier League review show, and they'd show the highlights of the week, and then they'd show a condensed match of the week. And it was on like night, maybe Saturday night, and it was the games from the week before. And now look at all of the options that we have, right? When I was in the 70s, when I was in Southern Alameda County Youth Soccer League, we couldn't fill up a football field with all of the teams from Oakland, Hayward, Castro Valley, San Lorenzo, San Leandro. We couldn't fill up one football field. And now it's, hundreds of thousands of players going on in the,
Yeah.
playing in the Bay Area. So it's progressed, but soccer's still the fifth most popular sport in the U.S., I think
Yeah.
in television revenue, we still lag behind hockey, you know? And so, it's moved up the ladder, but when we get, when your generation now, you grew up playing, and when you've got grandkids that are playing, I've got my first grandchild playing, and I was first generation soccer player in this country, really, as far as youth sports go. And it just takes time. So
Yeah. Yeah.
culturally, it's starting to sort of take a hold. Us in the soccer community fool ourselves into thinking, oh, it's very popular. We fool ourselves because
Yeah.
we're entrenched in the soccer community. But if you go talk to that grandfather in Ohio, he doesn't know, offside. He might know offside in hockey better than he knows offside in soccer.
Yeah.
It still has no clue what the game's about, doesn't understand the nuances of the game, doesn't know a free kick from a penalty kick, and
Yeah.
that's normal grandpa, normal dad in from middle of the, from flyover country, United States. They don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming them. I'm saying this takes time to build, right?
Takes
It's a
time. Yeah.
cultural issue. And once we've got a hold of the culture, then like you said, then a kid grows up at 2, 3 years old. The soccer ball's at their feet. A ball is part of the, you give the kid a rattle, and you give him a pacifier, and you give him a blanket, and you give him a soccer ball. That's what every
Yeah.
kid gets, part of the baby shower gift, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's getting there. I remember when I worked, there's a guy named Romeo Jozak that was the academy director of Dinamo Zagreb, and then he actually became the technical director for the Croatian Football Federation. And my really good friend Ivan Kepša was kind of like his right hand guy, and that was what actually facilitated the opportunity for me to go to be in Croatia when Ivan was appointed there in the academy in Romeo's uh, promotion to the federation. And I
Right.
remember being in Los Angeles with him. He was like presenting at like a Southern California, SoCal State whatever conference, and we were just in line like getting food, and like I was like next to him. It was right when I was getting to know him, and I was like asking him about like where do you see the growth of the US, and he's like, well, you got to look at your U15 national team today, and then you got to go 10 years from now and figure out what level they're at globally. And then at that same time, you got to go back and look at your U15 national team at that moment and where they're at globally, and then give them like 10 years to see where they shake out. And so he was kind of framing this thing, which for me at the time, I was like 26, I was like, geez, that seems like forever. You know what I mean? And I
Right.
think that was a long, that was a reason of which why I was like, you know what? I just want to go to the highest level. I want to get out of here. I don't want to waste my youth being in this level where I'm coaching a game and these kids are talking about the high school football game from the Friday night, like,
Right.
and then I kind of came back in many ways just because I love America and I want to grow soccer here. It's more meaningful to me here. Um, but yeah, just like having to wrap my head around the length of time in which it would take in his mind to be like, yeah, well, maybe in 30 years, you guys like
Well,
maybe will
yeah,
be like
yeah.
on the level. And you're like, damn, it's a long time, but it's true. It really is true. And it's not even just the culture. Right now, we're developing the surface level culture. Then it's like the deep culture. You know what I mean? We're like, some like random, like you go to I don't know, any country, Spain, wherever, and you could go find a random person, and let's just say an 80-year-old woman, right? They like didn't even play soccer. She'll probably have an opinion on what you're supposed to do in the 85th minute if you're winning 3-1. You know, she'll say go to the
Right.
corner. You know what I mean? Like there's just certain like even for me or for you, right? Like I never played basketball in high school or in college or professionally, but I played a lot and I can tell you about certain things from basketball with a knowledge base or football. I can talk about certain defensive schemes or I can talk about offensive strategies and and yet I only played freshman football but I played football all the way up until I was 14, and so like even for me that was not a high level football or basketball player or didn't stick with it at least to see if I could become high level. I still have like enough knowledge where like I could teach my kids how to throw a football, no problem. I can throw a football well. I can throw a football well, even to this day, right? Where like I throw a football every once in a while, or I can go shoot hoops and I can hit 3-point shots and I can look like I play, even though I haven't played pickup basketball in probably a decade, but I can
Right.
still go down there and dribble and I look like a basketball player or like I look like an amateur basketball player. But in soccer to get to that level, it highlights how saturated the culture of American football and American basketball, basketball and baseball and those sports are here to where even the mediocre person can still do it somewhat competently. You don't have that yet. Like now you maybe now have like I played soccer, my kids play soccer. In your example, you played soccer, your kids played soccer, your grandkids play soccer. But until it touches like even the random person that then has an idea about it, like that's where you really start to get deep, deep cultural saturation. And then when you see people that grow up in that, that's where you start seeing, to me at least, the ideas being formed about soccer. Like I'll always remember in Dinamo Zagreb at the academy, we had this like it's called the box. It was like a square field where they had like big wood walls that had been built, like 20-foot walls, and it was like you would go there for like strength training and kind of circuit work, and then they'd have some goals that were cut into the sides, kind of like indoor
Right.
goals. But it wasn't a full field; it was just like a rectangular or a square field, and we had a lot of youth national team kids in the academy program. So like, I was with the U16s. We were in a national team window, so like half of our team was gone, and then we had the 1998 born that was above us, and they were like almost the whole team or a lot of the team was gone. So we were doing a combined session because we were just with the kids that were left, and we had like a circuit training. And afterwards, and we probably had like 30 kids. Afterwards, we just let them play, just pick up. They could just go do whatever. It was in the winter, it was cold, whatever. So they're playing. So 30 kids in this like box, maybe like 40, 50 yard field by 50 yards. And they're playing as like a cluster of kids. Like it wasn't even foot. It was just like messing around, right? And the ball popped up, and there's maybe like 15 kids around, and this dude threw a bicycle kick, just like bam, threw a bike, and he executed the move. Like he threw up, did it, boom, and in that moment, I was like, man, imagine the decision making ability to be able to be like, I'm gonna throw a bicycle kick right here and that's my creative solution for this ball that popped up, and like just that to one be able to think about it and then be able to execute it, and execute it well. There's like so many layers to that, and like here I just not that you wouldn't see some kid do it, but it's hard to compete with those. There's a big gap between decision making and speed of decision making. And I think the cultural element aids that because these kids are getting touch points of information everywhere. They see it, it's in the news, it's on TV, it's in the newspaper. Their families are talking about it, they're talking about it in school. You know what I mean? And like that's why I think you see the talent that we have in basketball and football and these other sports where it's just so deeply ingrained. Everybody saw the Super Bowl, you know what I mean? Everybody
Right.
saw that pivotal play or whatever. And so I think we're on the track to get there. And I hope that our just law of averages, how big our country is, it'll help us accelerate that growth because like there's just so many kids playing it's almost like surprising that we haven't hit that critical mass yet of like world class players. But yeah, there's still a ways to go. So I'm excited to
Just
be
a
a
ways
part
to
of it,
go.
but yeah, it's a ways to go still.
It's culturally like we talked about, and then the guy that always comes to my mind, I don't know if you follow him on X or not, but a guy named Tom Byer, who's an American who's over in Japan, and
Yeah,
he talks about soccer begins at home,
yeah,
and the skill development. You talk about throwing and catching a football, not that much different than throwing and catching a baseball, not that much different than throwing and catching a basketball. A lot of similarities. There's some differences, but not that much. Playing with your feet is something that if you don't start doing when you're younger, it's really difficult to catch up, and you'll never catch up. I mean, I was a goalkeeper. I was terrible with my feet, and I was a goalkeeper. And I was a goalkeeper in the day when we weren't allowed to. I wasn't allowed to take my own goal kicks because
yeah,
I had a back that could kick it farther. So they'd say, just let him do it. Okay.
yeah,
So I could punt the ball. That's what I was allowed to do was punt the ball. But all we cared about was how far it went. We didn't care about who it went to. There was no tactics around it.
yeah,
So me playing with my feet, like I can juggle today and I can knock a ball against, I can knock a ball around today, but it's because I had to learn as an adult. I had to learn so I could teach kids, and I had to learn
yeah,
so I could train goalkeepers.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
had
Me
to be
too.
their guy. But believe me, I mean, at 15 years old, you guys could do stuff that I couldn't do, and you can still do stuff that I can't do. I can't juggle like my son Brad can juggle. He's a
Yeah,
freaking bag of tricks. And
yeah,
uh, it's because you can't catch up if you didn't get it when you were younger.
yeah,
So
yeah.
hell, I
Tom's great. Tom Byer is a great guy. I mean, that guy is like,
he's a great
why?
follow. If people don't follow
Yeah,
him, he's a
Tom Byer,
great
follow Tom.
follow on X.
Yeah, I had actually him and I had a call a couple weeks ago. I had like a long, like 1 hour plus phone call, and he was showing me clips from his kids, his own kids when they were like, little, and showing also some stuff from other kids, not clients, but kids that have used his method. And yeah, I mean, it's developing that comfort, that awareness with the ball, so that it's on the subconscious level.
Right.
Because when it's on the conscious level, again, like heart
It's
rate goes
slow. It's
up.
clunky. Yeah.
Yeah, and like yeah, your heart rate goes up. I think there's studies, right? Like if once you sweat out 2% of your body weight and water, now your coordination's differently. Your nervous system is functioning differently because you're dehydrated,
Right.
and so like if your technical skill only lives on your conscious level, it's not in your deep, like in your brain stem, wherever it lives in that like part of your
Right.
your kind of like ability network, like temperature, fatigue, dehydration, heart rate, pressure, all those things will take a player who's like technically good and not make them technically good to be able to execute. You put it on the subconscious level, and now you can start seeing. I think I saw a video where, and it's hard. There's even for the people that have it on the subconscious level, still impacts happen, but like they had like different athletes that were blindfolded and they were juggling. And of course, Ronaldinho was
Yeah.
like the
Yeah. I
best
saw
one.
that. Pro soccer players. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like so, like even there, right? But still, like you just think about that. Um, you know, Tom talking about, what do you do with a 12-month-old kid? I'm doing that with my daughter right now, and um, so yeah, I think that there's things where like at the end of the day, the one of the benefits of the internet now is that like a motivated parent doesn't necessarily need to be as reliant on the club to provide the development
True.
environment. Like they can go and figure out some stuff, and then you get like the parent kid coaching your kid thing. Maybe some kids don't like that or whatever, but there is a lot of information out there. And yeah, anyone listening to this, Tom Byer, I think he just put out his free book. He's like makes it all available and accessible. Just got to download the PDF. Um, but then also you look at Japanese football, and it's not like they're winning World Cups.
No,
So
but they are. I tell you what, every Japanese play, virtually every college coach that I know that gets a Japanese player, they talk about how much more technical the players are
oh yeah, they're
and
great.
how much fitter those players are.
Yeah,
than our American players. There's two things
they
they
are
don't have to
great.
worry about, and that's
I saw a
fitness
film
and
of a
their
baseball
technical
kid.
ability.
I saw a film of a baseball kid. It was like on X, and this kid was like it was like a Japanese kid that had moved to America, was in an American classroom, and he was dry repping throwing like in the class. Like they're just having like unstructured playtime. This kid was just doing reps without a ball, just of like going through the pitching motion and delivering the pitch and going back and just boom, 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 and I think, yeah, for sure. I mean, the Japanese, especially with the limited space that they have for fields and like the ways in which they have to do more with less, again, Tom is like world class. It's a shame that he hasn't been, from US soccer or one of the, the kind of powers that be here to really work with him to implement what he does. I mean, he's got from he was doing TV programs and he's got the whole kit what they could do. So, yeah,
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 no, it's
he's a
other.
good
So
one.
what were some of your other influences um, growing up, coaching influences?
Well, we talked about it the other day. Obviously, Marcus Zimmer was a big one for me. So,
Me too,
I played.
brother.
Yeah,
That
he
that
was.
one, you were the one who kind of broke the news to me. You had reposted one of my tweets when about Sonoma State losing soccer, and I don't know why you chose that one to repost, but you had said something about, oh, it's a shame or whatever, and I said no, he'll be back, and you said no, he passed away, and it's like what? Wait, no, and
Yeah.
I spent the next 5 hours on the phone with friends that I hadn't talked to a little while that Marcus influenced their lives, but the Zimmer brothers, Marcus being the oldest of them, yeah, I could see that being an influence on your life.
Well, yeah, and I played at SF State, so I played for Joe Hunter, and Joe Hunter and Marcus were like, best buddies, and Joe played at Sonoma State, and
Yep.
Uh, I was a freshman at SF State in 2005. So they had won the national championship in 2002. They were the top team. And so I just had those are my first exposures to him just as an athlete and being like, when Snow was the top team in our conference. Like, I'm happy I'm at State, but I would love to be at Sonoma State. And then, just kind of as I got into later into my 20s and got into coaching, and he was really the model of just like, he'd been there for so long. He'd won stuff. He was successful, but you could just see the impacts that he had on all these guys. It was like this huge community. And I knew some guys that one of my high school classmates from O'Dowd, Dave Seidel, who's maybe a guy that you would remember, David
Yeah,
Seidel.
I remember Dave. Yep.
Yeah, he played at Sonoma State. So I'd go up there. I got to know some of their guys, and they had this huge alumni network, and they were super involved, and everything gravitated around Marcus, and so he was for sure the first. Franz Hoek, I was really lucky with Franz to be exposed to him
Again, through a Zimmer brother connection. They
through
brought him
Andrew.
over
Yeah, yeah, through
first.
Andrew.
Yeah, he changed
Andrew
my
coming over
life.
there, and yeah, just
Yeah.
his very like structured, way, and like he can just like cut somebody down in like 3 words and just very like just I love that part about
And for
him.
those that don't know Franz was he was a goalkeeper coach at Ajax for the Dutch national team, and then he went with Van Gaal to Barcelona, and then at Manchester United, and he's one of FIFA's goalkeeper coaches. So they'll send him all over the world to train countries' goalkeeper coaches on how to train goalkeepers. FIFA will. So he's a
Yeah,
big time coach.
yeah. And so Franz was a for me it was like he the first director of coaching course that NorCal did, the pilot course. I was able to get into that, and just seeing how he structures everything, and I still have the notebook somewhere in my house, like, fat stack of papers, and NorCal at that they still do a great job with everything. But at that point it was when the coaching education program was really kicking off. They do those
Right,
international events at USF every year where they'd have like
right.
Rude Doctor and Gordon Young and all these guys that bring the guys out from Benfica. I wouldn't say as much of an inspiration because he's a very tough guy, but I worked for Paulo Bonomo one of the NorCal
Okay.
co-founders for a long time. Paulo's like old school Italian guy, and was one of the guys, was the guy actually that I think had kind of connected with Fiorentina, and that was a different methodology. It was not maybe something that I was like, wow, that's the coolest thing ever, but Paulo was very regimented with that, and I worked in a little academy in Redwood City with him, where it was like Paulo was the director, and me and one other guy were the coaches. So for like 3 years, I'd be at like
Wow.
in his home in his living room, just getting grilled on like the psychomotoric abilities and all the different stuff, and very, so I would say that the Fiorentina method was interesting in some ways because it was like a different way of approaching this issue in society of kids
Right.
not crawling and walking and running. Although to me, I think it's a little too isolated, or maybe not realistic for the limited time that we have with the kids, where you have to really play football and train football to make them better. Um, I would say, Romeo Jozak from the Dinamo Zagreb and Croatian football
Sure.
school. That was a big one. Uh, and of course, like Mourinho was awesome for me. I'm a huge Mourinho fan. I always remember there's a clip of him where he's like giving a pregame speech to Chelsea, and he's like, I'm not going to put the pressure on you that we can't, that we, that we can't, that we have to win this game. I'm not going to put the pressure that we have to win this game, but we can't lose. And like just little stuff
Yeah.
like that, right? Little just like tactics of that. So yeah, I was lucky, but again, to your point, right? Like there's so much more information available to these guys now as young coaches. Like when I was a player, yeah, we had like Fox Soccer Channel. I remember the Premier League replays where you just that was it. You had if you wanted to watch all the games that you didn't see, you had to watch that 1 hour show and you get to see all the highlights of all the games. Now you can go and you can go watch Bulgaria first division, and you can
Right.
probably, if you go on their social media, go to some team in Bulgaria, and you can probably capture what the coach is doing in training or in the locker room, or if you're really looking,
Right.
you can get so much. Arrigo Sacchi was an influence, I would say.
Yeah.
I remember watching old films of him. Like kids today would break down. That would be a fun test to see. I would watch some of his stuff where he would do 11 versus 0 pattern play with no ball. Like kids they would crap themselves. So they would be so bored they'd
Even
be out of their
defensive
equipment.
sessions, because he was the king. He was the first person that I remember doing zonal defending as a master. It was zonal defending. I mean, before that, it was, now they're talking about going back to man-man defending. That's one of the
Yeah.
discussions nowadays. But no, the Arrigo Sacchi, and we did defending. That was one of the sessions that I used to run, was defending without a ball. Just the
Yeah.
Sachi flags we would have set up all over the field and do
And
defending without a ball with the whole team shifting and pressing. And I did that
yeah.
for 25 years of my coaching, all the way up to the last day I coached in college. I would teach that every year. I think Brad still uses it. No,
Yeah. And
Sachi's a good one.
and you think about like again, the imagination of some of these kids, right? To be able to then like I think a lot of kids wouldn't be able to do that. Or they would like
Yeah,
not
maybe.
they would struggle in some ways. I mean, obviously they can adapt to it quickly. It's not
Sure.
like they've lost the ability to do that, but
Sure.
like just that like type of the ability of the coach to present this vision and then compel the players to adapt to it. 11 versus 0 with no ball, right? Like that's
Yeah, pretty,
imagine
pretty,
imagine
pretty.
how many emails you get from parents in a youth club setting
Oh
like,
yeah,
"Man, I
yeah,
went to the
yeah. They'd want
training
to
and a
fire
soccer
you.
ball out
Yeah.
there. Yeah. What are we paying for? I want a refund." So he would have been another Alex Ferguson, obviously, reading his autobiography, A Will to Win.
Yeah,
That
it's a
was
good one.
great.
If nobody's
That was
read that yet,
a
that's a good
good
one.
book.
Yeah.
I also studied a lot of Bill Belichick, and
I
just
love
watching
that. I
that
love that you
team.
brought up a coach in another sport, because I think that's so important. In my early coaching days, Benny, I would go and watch our basketball coach at Arroyo High School. He was a
Yeah,
really good coach, and just watch him. So I love that you brought up a coach from another sport.
yeah, Belichick is great. There's an NFL Films documentary that they did on him, a 1 hour segment where it was just, very behind the scenes of his whole kind of way of being. And I always remember he was addressing the Patriots in the preseason game. It was the first preseason game of the season, and he was saying, you can look at this as a preseason game and yeah, it doesn't mean anything or whatever. Or this is our first opportunity to establish our measure of success. And
Sure.
whatever you go do in this first game, that's our starting point, and then we're going to build off of that. And if you want to, piss off this game and not do anything with it, that would be a waste, and this
Right.
is our first chance, and so that one, obviously John Wooden, right, would be another one when you start thinking about his whole what is it? Success is self-satisfaction and knowing that you did your best to become the best that you're capable of becoming. And he was like very wordsmith with these, he just had that memorization of just say it out there. But like I think that, kind of success is being the best that you can become. That was a huge thing for me. I mean, Carol Dweck and the growth mindset. I read a lot about neuroplasticity and other stuff, how the brain learns. And so I kind of really developed, I mean, I put a lot of hours into that before,
Sounds like it.
when coaching was my journey. And then I just kind of pivoted and spent the last decade, building clubs and then, still involved in soccer in different ways at the youth level and being around the game. A lot of my buddies that are still at high levels professionally that I talk to and kind of keep myself in the loop. Maybe at some point I'll go back to it. We'll see. I miss it in
Yeah,
some
you were
ways.
mentioning that the other day when we were talking about maybe getting back into that side of it. But right now you're involved in the club side of it. Tell us a little bit about the town, the concept, and what you guys have going at the town.
Yeah, the concept was to, put an MLS Next Pro independent pro club together. That's still very much the hope and what we're working towards. A lot of that's as we talked about, like you got to go figure out stadium and a bigger, larger development than just a stadium. So that's kind of our next couple of years as our group moves forward is doing that, figuring that out. Right now, our program, we had for the last 2 years had been with the Earthquakes as their affiliate club. So kind of like renting the team from them. And our academy now, we actually have a MLS Next program, homegrown and academy division. And so our focus is on the youth level. And I think as we look at the hopeful trajectory of a stadium project, and a couple sites that we're actually kind of looking at and preliminarily kind of doing some initial studies of, um, you think about these kids that are 15, 16, and in 3 years, maybe some of those kids can become those homegrown local players that we've been able to develop. So the for me, it's been interesting this last season because this has been the first year of our MLS Next program.
All
It was a
right.
pre-existing from Dabble Valley FC, and we've partnered with them on that, and we're kind of planning for next year. What direction we want to go with it, and everything, even from what will that program be called as we move forward. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see the level, and it had been a while since I had been involved at that day-to-day level of MLS, or what the academy would have been. It would have been since Cal Odyssey, at the
Right.
American level. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talent. So I'm excited about now kind of being in that space. Um, we've got, I want to say two of our 6 teams I think have qualified for the MLS Next postseason. Um, at the younger ages, they actually do it a little different. They don't even keep standings, or their standings, or they're based on a style points for how they play. Like there's like a style of play scoring system. But we've got good teams. Obviously, as you know, there's a bunch of talented players in the East Bay.
Oh yeah,
So it's
loaded.
it's just, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting just to see honestly how many kids that are at the level that aren't even in the league, and like there's just like those one-off kids playing in a NorCal club or playing in the elite academy, or just kind of like not on the radar. So I just feel like there's a lot of potential. We've been kind of focusing partnerships on with clubs that don't have the elite status, so kind of trying to build pathways from clubs that are good clubs that
Okay.
no matter what, they're not going to get it, or they're not going to get it right now, maybe a couple years for them. So a lot of times those clubs lose their players to other clubs that have MLS Next, and they don't always feel good about that process or what that does. And so we've actually created, like we announced a big partnership with Vacaville United,
Okay.
where it's, you know, a very healthy club. They just don't have the elite status. And
Right.
um, Chris Hall is their executive director.
Yeah, I know Chris.
We played for Daryl Wilkins at Ballistic
Yeah.
together, and known each other for over half of our lives. And so, you know, like just there's trust, and so you know, for him it was like wanting to have a pathway for their players where, hey, if you're good enough, this is where you go. And if our coaches want to be involved, they can be involved. At the same time, we're not like with the Rush or a Surf, we're not making the club rebrand themselves as us.
Right. You're not doing a franchise model. Right.
So yeah, so there's a partnership model where there's a pathway and there's direct involvement from their coaches and their players in our higher level programs. But Vacaville can, you know, because they've been around forever, right? And so to rebrand
Right.
them, that would be like one, I just think a loss for their community, and just a non-starter for them. And so I think I've been able to recognize that a lot of these clubs, they value their identity, they value being a community asset, but they also recognize that they don't have that elite level program. Um, Maybe that will change as more opportunities become available, and maybe that will be less of a thing. But that's kind of what we're doing now, is kind of democratizing that elite level. And it's been fun, you know. It's been Youth clubs are challenging, right? Like field space in the East Bay is a challenge, and there are other programs, so there's competition amongst, you know, where do these kids want to stay here? Do they want to go there? It's kind of a revolving door of players sometimes. The high school issue is a big one for the homegrown division. That's a big issue. They can't play high school. Um, I don't know how that change. I don't think it will change, but you know, we'll have kids that will start the year with the homegrown, and then they'll drop out to go do high school, and then they'll come back, but they'll play academy division, which allows that. You know, so it's kind of like I see it from both sides. Personally, I think high school is good in some ways. Um, Depends on the coach and what they're doing with the kids, I guess. But that's been an eye opener for me, just to really see the issue that that presents for clubs when a kid wants to, even their senior
Yeah,
year.
I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that it has to be that way because I think even if the coach is not the greatest, I think there's something about a freshman and a sophomore and a junior playing with older players, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
and then there's just something about playing with your friends, man, and playing with your buddies that you went to elementary school with, right? You went to
yep,
junior high school with, the guys that you grew up with, and playing in front of those people. Also,
yeah,
there's something about that. And then there's also leadership opportunities that can be available to high school that may not be available to club for certain players.
yep.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I echo that. You know, I remember getting called up to varsity, and like, you know, how nervous I was, you know, and then playing obviously, you know, varsity, and you know, for the years I was there, having the freshmen on your team, and you know, a little bit of hazing, not hazing, but you know, like a little bit of giving them a little bit of crap here and there, and then also at the same time having the guys that were 1 year older or 2 years older that are on your team,
Right,
and just kind of that social thing of now you've got friends at a different age group, you see them
right,
around and it's different, and you know, being able to wear your jersey to school that day, and you know, get some recognition, fans, right? Like you get into NCS or certain games. I no doubt I was there when it was still the Hayward Area Athletic League. Now it's
right.
something else, right? But like, you know,
Yeah,
I
I don't know
remember,
what it is now, but yeah, right.
yeah, right. So like, I remember, you know, you have some games where NCS people come out and they'd watch, and you know, you don't get that at your club team, that's for sure. So I'm a
No,
fan of high school soccer. I get why, you know, the league doesn't allow it in some ways, because like they want to maximize their environment and allow their coaches
right,
to have a 10-month season, and from planning and periodization and all the continuity that they
right,
want. Like I get that.
right.
So it's kind of I think the compromise is that the academy division allows for it to play high school soccer. So
Yeah,
you
right.
couldn't
Fair
get
enough.
a kid that can start, play half of the year homegrown, go if they want to do academy, go to academy, or sorry, go to high school and then come back and play academy. And then, maybe the next year do it different. Or even for a kid that's a senior that maybe like freshman, sophomore, junior year, they did full-time MLS. They want to play their senior year of high school. Maybe they're already committed and they just want that year to do it, right? Like, so I could see how
Sure.
that could be a thing. But then it kind of allows them to do that and then come back to academy. I think ECNL allows for high school, I want to say, right? Like that's a different approach where they could actually do high school, I think.
Yeah, I
But
can't keep up, dude. I can't keep track. I can't keep up. Um, in our job with Sports Recruiting USA, we're worried about that player and how that player is doing, and we're just tracking that. So the rules and why they're making rules and the age group changes now. It's like
yeah,
it's most of that stuff don't.
oh,
People
it's
ask me
crazy
what I
for me.
think, and I said I don't care. It's
Even to this day, why don't they just call it under 12, under 13 like they used to be? Now it's like they got to go off of the birth year. Even for me, it's like you tell me you're a 2016 and I still got to do the math. You know what I mean? Or like you tell me you're a 2012, yeah, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. That's almost like
Yeah, and as a
complicated.
college coach, you go by the grad year. So that's what we're talking about. They're 2026 or 2027. And like you said, I've got to do the math. When somebody tells me, "Oh, birth year," oh, wait a minute, and I've got to do the math and it's too
Yeah.
complicated. Yeah.
Just say U16, I get it. I know exactly where you're at. U19, I think
Right.
that's the last, that's it. You know what I mean? Like U12,
Right.
yeah, it's kind of the American make it more complicated than it needs to be, let alone the alphabet soup of all these different leagues that exist and all the acronyms. And, in some ways it's cool, right? Because like you and I right now, we could be like, hey, let's go make a new youth league and we can go form an LLC and we can
Yeah.
trademark a name and we
Yeah.
can work our networks and convince all these coaches to go leave the league that they're in and join our league and we can incrementally build it. And maybe if we do that in 5 years, we've got some amazing thing that we've built. Whereas like in other parts of the world, you're not changing, disrupting the way it is. The way it is the way it is. Now they have promotion relegation, so the pro level their clubs can go up and then they can get a higher category of their academy or whatever. But I can see how like America that's very much like I got to be able to do my own thing if I want to, that you can get these kind of like tribalistic things around these leagues where like for me like NorCal, that's cool that it exists. I think they've done a great job what they've built.
Actually, North
And
Cal's pretty
yeah,
pretty amazing, and
pretty amazing
SoCal
what
has
they've
done the
done.
same type of thing. But I tell you, I'll go and watch NorCal events and then watch an MLS Next event and go, many of the teams I can't see a difference, and
Yeah, I would
certainly
agree.
ECNL. There's some really talented kids, and there's kids playing very high level college soccer, high level Division One soccer. All they ever played was NorCal. They never played ECNL or MLS Next.
Yeah,
So it's certainly possible in highly dense, population dense areas like the Bay Area, or in areas like Florida or, New York. It's definitely possible. And then in other areas of the country, maybe Maine or, the Midwest in certain areas, if you're not in Chicagoland, it's not possible. There's just
yeah,
not enough players I can see how it hurts. And I think my only downside, Benny, to all of that is from a player identification standpoint, it makes it really hard. And it's really hard for college coaches, for example. You can't cover NAL and ECNL and MLS Next. So, when MLS Next Flex goes on down in Frisco in a few weeks, that's where most of the college coaches are going to be. They just can't be at all of the different events all around the country. It's too spread out. Talent's too
yeah,
spread out. That's the downside is it's hard to get that scouting done as you would be able to in a more condensed environment.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so I think maybe it's to an extreme now that there's all these different leagues and whatever, but like NorCal is a great example of the benefit of our society to where you can just go build your own thing. And like I remember class one, class three, class four as an
Right,
example, right? And
right.
everybody, if you want to be class one, you had to play Bay Oaks and Jack London Youth Soccer League. That they ran that whole thing. And now you've got groups like Clippers and Piedmont Soccer Club and Alameda Soccer Club, and they're all linked up. They're doing their own thing, and they're better than what East Bay United Bay Oaks has been. Um, so I think it's good. It's probably there's probably going to be more of it. I don't know in which way. I don't think anyone's going to come in like I don't think the Saudis are going to come in and do like a Division
Right,
One men's league. Like maybe
right,
right, maybe somebody will if there's enough private equity flowing around, maybe somebody will do like a league owned league of some sort, right? But
maybe.
I think we're pretty much getting to like maximum growth.
Yeah.
Although who knows, right? There's probably a bunch like the DPL and E64 and all the other things, right? So
Well, you know
we'll
what?
see.
The free market does tend to take care of itself. I mean, there's a couple of them that they've struggled and they're clearly not making it. They're not succeeding as leagues, and so they'll go away and there'll be either absorption or somebody else will come up with a new idea. But I think the marketplace kind of takes care of itself in the long run.
Yeah, yeah. There's consolidation, I think, happening now too, where you're starting to get some of those leagues that aren't making it, and then they just get rolled up into leagues that are, and yeah, it's a wild time to be alive in soccer, that's for sure.
Hey, that's thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. This has been a really good catch up with you, first of all.
Yeah, yeah, same here. Time flies. Tell Brad, send Brad my best. Where's he at? So he's in
I will.
Idaho?
North Idaho College in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
And yeah, and
yeah.
everything you're doing, like it's just amazing to see. The college recruiting process is insane, right? And families that are just like they've put all this money in and they're trying to figure out how to get a good outcome. And so like I'm sure, different clients you work with, some are easier than others, but I'm sure there's some miracles you're doing out there for folks to help them get where they're going. I mean, I just want to
Thanks. Yeah, it's
acknowledge
it's
that, man. That's
it's it's
important work.
spreading the knowledge that it's not, when you grew up, like you said, you went to San Francisco State. You were probably going to go to East Bay or San Francisco State or Sonoma State, and that's about all there was. Maybe Monterey Bay, and that's all there. And not Monterey Bay wasn't even around then,
Yeah.
but that would have been it, and that's what it was. But now, kids are traveling all over the country to go to school, and so many different colleges options that weren't available. So you and I will talk off the air and we'll connect on that. I know I still wanted to talk to you a little bit more about that, but
For
I really
sure.
appreciate you coming on. I know that there's going to be a lot of parents and kids and coaches that appreciate this episode. So thanks, man.
Yeah, no, thank you. Hope they all enjoy it.
All right. No, I know they will. Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it.
All right.